In the recesses of language, beneath the scaffold of grammar and the illusion of comprehension, lies a quiet catastrophe of fundamental fracture at the heart of human expression. It is not merely that our attempts to define, describe, or articulate are imprecise, nor that our senses are unreliable narrators of reality, but rather that the very act of making statements, asserting that S is P, that something is something, initiates a collapse. This is not a superficial ambiguity, but a profound implosion, a breakdown of identity and essence beneath the weight of its own articulation. Language, which promises understanding, turns out to be a machine of obliteration, where every predicate does violence to its subject, and every attempt at meaning becomes a ceremony of unmaking. To say the rose is red appears innocuous, even banal. It seems to convey a basic empirical truth, something apprehended directly through the senses. Yet, on closer inspection, this sentence is not a description, but a transmutation, a moment where the rose ceases to be a stable, independent entity and instead becomes subsumed within a field of relational difference and perceptual flux. Red is not a static property inhering within the rose. It is an ephemeral event, a spectral consequence of light, eye, memory, context, and expectation. The moment we name the rose as red, we unmoor it from its presumed identity and drag it into an ocean of negations. It is not blue, not green, not shadowed, not faded yet. It is also none of these definitively. The subject rose becomes less itself and more a placeholder for the infinite deferral of meaning that follows in the wake of its description. The small, innocuous verb becomes the fulcrum of this crisis. Ostensibly, it links subject to predicate, affirming a relationship of being, but in truth, it is a sighted disintegration. The predicate, instead of solidifying the subject, dissolves it. The more one tries to fix identity with descriptive language, the more that identity slips away. The is doesn't affirm being it, gestures toward a void. It opens a wound in the sentence where essence bleeds out, and in its place arises not clarity, but a kind of semantic vertigo, a spiraling uncertainty that deepens with each attempt at definition. This linguistic unraveling does not halt at the level of the individual statement. Once one accepts that any description fails to pin down identity, an infinite redress begins. S is P demands justification. Why is P applicable to S? What does applicable mean? On what grounds is applicability valid? Each answer births another question. Each explanation demands its own description. This chain does not ascend toward truth, but descends into recursive annihilation, where each level erodes the stability of the one before it. It is not simply that knowledge is hard to reach, but that the entire structure of description is a recursive system of decay. The further one goes, the more the original subject, that S, is denegated, hollowed out, and transformed into a phantom of failed reference. Identity, in this schema, is not a given, but a residue. It is not a stable core revealed by language, but a scar left by language's collapse. The self or thing is not a being, but the echo of its own unmaking, a negative trace left by the implosion of meaning. Like a burned-out star whose light still haunts the sky, the subject remains as an after-image of its own annihilation. The truth of being, then, is not something discovered through description, but something that reveals itself only in the ruins of descriptive failure. It is not the substance of a sentence, but the void it outlines not to speak. Therefore, is not to describe the world, but to participate in a process of existential destabilization. Language becomes a ritual of decay, a kind of sacrificial structure, where meaning is endlessly offered up and devoured. In this light, grammar, the supposed order of thought, is revealed to be a system of containment that masks a deeper chaos. Beneath every sentence, lurks an abyss, and each word is a gesture toward a thing that refuses to be held. There arises, then, a need for a new kind of language, not a utopian or perfected one, but a language forged in the recognition of its own collapse, a post-linguistic language, or perhaps a pre-ontological one, that does not pretend to name the world, but instead bears witness to the impossibility of naming. This language does not operate within the old binaries of subject and predicate, creator and creation, essence and attribute. Instead, it dwells in the space before these distinctions, a linguistic twilight where words flicker like dying stars, casting ghostlight on a reality that recedes the closer one approaches. Here, words are not tools of definition, but whirlpools of negation. They collapse inward, not to reveal new depths of meaning, but to expose the emptiness at their core. Meaning becomes a shimmer, not a substance, a spark defined entirely by what it is not. These sparks, momentary flashes of significance, exist only in the act of self-destruction, in the undoing of language's own form. They are events, not objects, ruptures, not bridges. In them, the very idea of knowledge is transformed into certainty, but into an aesthetic, a haunted beauty arising from the recognition that nothing can be truly said. Truth, then, is no longer a correspondence between statement and reality, nor is it coherence within a logical system. It is what flickers at the edge of perception. When language fails, it is a ghostly presence, a negative illumination that appears only in the gaps, the silences, the moments of breakdown. It is the trace left behind after the machinery of meaning grinds to a halt. Like a scream written in ash, it is both ephemeral and permanent. Ephemeral in its content, permanent in its structure of absence. To dwell in this space is not to despair, though it may be to tremble. For while the collapse of identity and the failure of description strip away the illusions of stability and understanding, they also open a door to something deeper. In the absence of fixed meaning, there emerges a strange clarity, not of concept, but of experience. The rose is no longer red, and in ceasing to be red, it also ceases to be rose in any conventional sense. It becomes instead a moment of happening, a pulse of being that resists containment. This happening is not describable, but it is real in a way that descriptions never are. It is the raw material of experience before the imposition of language, before the world is sliced into subjects and predicates. The final collapse of description, then, is not a failure to be mourned, but an unveiling to be endured. It is a painful peeling away, like bark stripped from a tree, revealing the trembling vitality beneath. The self, exposed in this way, is no longer a stable I, but a locus of becoming, a tremor in the field of being. This is the self, not as noun but as verb, not as essence but as echo. It is the self that is born and dies in each moment of speech, resurrected and undone in the same breath. This transformation implicates ethics, perception, and even existence itself. If identity is a fiction maintained by a language that is always disintegrating, then so too are the structured social, moral, psychological that rely upon stable identities. The categories we live by, the roles we inhabit, the moral certainties we cling to all are written in the same decaying grammar. To recognize the false solidity of SSP is to call into question the very foundations of personhood, of judgment, of reality as we think we know it. Yet it also reveals the potential for a more honest form of being, not grounded in assertion, but in attentiveness, not in certainty, but in openness to the shimmer of being that resists definition. At the far edge of this collapse, beyond the last crumbling sentence, lies a silent space. It is the space where language can no longer follow, where the mind falls. Quiet, not from satisfaction, but from exhaustion. In this silence, the world begins again, not as a set of things to be described, but as a field of presences to be encountered. Here, truth is not something to be spoken, but something to be felt in the bones, in the shiver of the skin, in the breathless awareness of presence without form. This is the truth that flinches when we name it. This is the language that signs its name in the ashes and disappears. This is the rose which never was red, and yet burns red in the moment of its vanishing. And this is the self-made, unnamed, and unbearably real trembling in the wreckage of description, alive, in the silent scream of being that no sentence can ever hold.
To read the raw excerpt discussed in this video, along with a more detailed analysis, please visit our Substack page at https://substack.com/@AETHYRICPHRONTISTERY. Link in bio.